Welcome to Discover the Wonder, where we explore curiosity, mystery, and those awe-inspiring moments that make life feel bigger than ourselves. Today, we're joined by somebody whose work lives right at the intersection of mystery and meaning, Professor Dr. Theresia de Vroom. She's a renowned Shakespeare scholar, a teacher, and a lifelong explorer of worlds. Theresia, welcome to Discover the Wonder.
Thank you for having me. It's a very great pleasure.
Oh, it's our pleasure. In the interest of full disclosure, Theresia was my Shakespeare professor almost now 30 years ago, scarily.
But I'm still only 35.
But of course, neither of us has really meaningfully aged. But it's so nice to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everything, and I just want to say, everything I ever learned about life was in Shakespeare and at the gym.
Wow.
We won't get to the gym part, but we're going to talk about.
Because I'm not going to your gym.
No, we're going to talk about all about what we have learned from Shakespeare. So yes, you brought us a bunch of. For those who cannot see, by the way, please join us and follow us on YouTube. You can see all of the wonderful art that Theresia brought. So please.
So Daniel asked me to talk about wonder, and I wanted to say something about that to begin with. My parents were immigrants. My dad was Dutch. My mother was Dutch Indonesian. My dad had a degree, only went to the 6th grade because of the war in Holland, and then got sent as a soldier to Indonesia, where he met my mother ultimately, and they married. And we came to the States, and my dad, who was not educated that well, but was really smart, we would go to church every Sunday with my mom, and he would not come because he was making breakfast. But we'd come home to him blaring the Matthew Passion of J.S. Bach in the house every Sunday. And when I was 6 years old, he took me to my every piano lesson and took me to the library. And the first book he pulled out for me was The Wood Prince of Albrecht Dürer. And I remember opening the book, and I was 6. And I remember looking at them and not understanding them and thinking, holy shit, what is this? It's a miracle. And I think what's included in wonder is seeing the miracle and being curious. And I think that's a really important part of what wonder is. And I think, so often our children, all children can draw and paint and do all kinds of things. And then we give them coloring books and they think that the world is inside lines. It's not. And so this idea of curiosity and wonder gets erased so many times. And it's a big problem for college students. So I think wonder is taken out of children today sometimes because all children can paint and draw. And I remember teaching piano lessons to little kids, and I'd have these little boys who were like rowdy and whatever, and you teach them all kinds of things. And then suddenly you teach them to play Mozart's first little composition, which is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I had little boys run out and go, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. So this idea that we should not erase curiosity and wonder from children's lives at all. And we do it all the time by giving them coloring books, by giving them not the way to actually do art properly. So why does Shakespeare matter? So you're going to see a portrait of Shakespeare, which is in the National Portrait Gallery. We think it's a correct portrait and probably the best one. And Shakespeare matters for many reasons. And people talk about he was the person, and maybe this is wrong, but I kind of believe it, that invented the modern human being, that had a consciousness, a sense of all kinds of things: betrayal, tragedy, love, sex, all kinds of things, beauty, that are different from the greats like Socrates or Jesus or other people. And so if you look at that portrait, you can see this quite extraordinary face, and why he matters and how did he become who he is. And this is an incredibly interesting mystery. And it's like the mystery of Mozart. Genius is uncomparable. And Mozart, if he hadn't died when he was in his 30s, probably music would have been over. Shakespeare didn't start right until he was 30, and he wrote, I'm standing here with this big book, all these plays until he died at the age of 54, and a bunch of sonnets and everything else. How did he do it? He never went to university. He had an education where he learned Latin. And we know a lot about his education. So if you know anything about Latin, it's like German and Russian and ancient Greek and other languages that have declensions. And declensions, it's a big word, but it means that the word endings change the way that you can put a sentence together. So if I said to you, the dog bit the boy, or the boy bit the dog, those are totally different because word order in English matters. But in Latin, Greek, German, other languages, Russian, the word order doesn't matter, which means they are chess games. You can move everything around. So little boys of Shakespeare's age learned Latin perfectly, went to church and heard sermons in Latin and listened to them and were forced to write them down from memory. Now, nothing I've said to you today would you be able to write down from memory, probably, because we're not trained that way anymore, right? And then little boys, a few years later, would be taught to write what's called a gloss, which is an interpretation of what the priest said or about the text of the Bible. Okay, so what Shakespeare's audience were perfect literary critics, literary readers, which is a whole ball game. And what did these little boys do? Shakespeare didn't do this, but most of these little boys, many of them went to Cambridge and Oxford. And many of them afterward went to something called the Inns of Court, which are still there today in London, which is they studied to be lawyers. Now, what does it mean to be a lawyer? Okay. And that we were taught, I don't know if you were taught this, but I was taught this, that there were all these groundlings in Shakespeare's theaters, which were poor people sitting on the floor, listening to the plays. Well, you know what? Poor people have day jobs. And Shakespeare's plays were performed during the day. They're not going to be sitting on the floor paying whatever they're supposed to pay. And the tickets were expensive. It was courtiers and it was lawyers. Okay. Who are lawyers? What are lawyers trained to do? They're trained to read carefully documents and understand them. And so if I came to you and I was guilty as who knows what, right? If you're my lawyer, you've got to figure out another story to defend me, right? So what Shakespeare is a genius about is that in every play that he writes, there are not one single way through that is right. There are many perspectives, right, to be true. And so, yes, is The Merchant of Venice anti-Semitic? Yes, but maybe not. Is Othello racist? Yes, but maybe not. Is King Lear a jerk? Maybe, but maybe not. So there's always this kind of crossover about how to think about what is really true. And so lawyers were his primary audience. And remember, who goes to the movies in LA during the day? Only two people on a Tuesday afternoon. Old people and students ditching class, right? Nobody else goes, right? So who goes to the plays in the afternoon? People ditching class, lawyers. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an image of Queen Elizabeth I. And this is called the Rainbow Portrait by Marcus Gerhards II. And what you are looking at, Queen Elizabeth was very conscious of her image. She was queen the entire time, almost, that Shakespeare was alive. And her paintings were totally not the same as paintings that were happening at the time, which had much more shading and much more evocative things. She was in control of it because she wanted to look like a saint. And she imitated the Virgin Mary, who you might remember was thrown out by Martin Luther and by the whole Protestant Revolution. And if you look at her, she's got a hat on with a moon on top of it, which is a symbol of virginity. She was called the Virgin Queen. Whether she was a virgin or not, we don't know. But so she's talking about the goddess Cynthia, Artemis, Diana. Okay, she's got a big diaphanous fan around her. And the fan, sorry, I hooked up this to trouble anybody, is a symbol of her hymen not being broken. Okay, so she's perfectly visible. All right, she's wearing pearls, symbol of virginity. She has on her left-hand sleeve a snake with a diamond, with a ruby hanging out of it. And the snake is not what we think of snakes, which are dangerous and idiots and whatever, or perhaps they're not. But the snake was a symbol of wisdom. And the symbol of wisdom is holding the heart, which says wisdom prevails over the heart. You don't mess with your heart when you come to love. And she's holding her hand a rainbow. And if to quote James Baldwin, when he talked about the myth of Noah or the story of Noah, um, no, God said, James Baldwin said, no more water the fire next time. The rainbow is the symbol of the covenant between God and mankind. And she's holding it to say she's a symbol of peace. So, with that said, I will read you something from Midsummer Night's Dream. And one of the most famous critics of Shakespeare, whom I adore, said, whenever a woman says anything in Shakespeare, sometimes she doesn't have a lot of lines, but you better listen to what the lines are. And this is at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream. Lovers have been lost in a forest. All kinds of crazy things happen. There are fairies. There's all kinds of love juice thrown into people's eyes, all kinds of crazy things. And this is now the wedding ceremony in which Hippolyta marries Theseus, which is a very complicated story, and which I won't go into. But Theseus says something against Hippolyta, and I'm going to read this to you. Hippolyta says, "'Tis strange, my Theseus, that these lovers speak of, and she's right." And he says, "More strange than true. I never may believe these antic fables, nor these fairy toys. Lovers and madmen have such seething brains," meaning that their brains explode, right? "Such shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of an imagination all compact." Now, what does that mean? A crazy person, a lover, and a poet are the same. Why is that true? Right? So their imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is a madman. So somebody who's schizophrenic, let's say, or somebody who's crazy, sees hell everywhere. The lover, all as frantic, just like a crazy person, sees in a brow of Egypt, and a brow means just a regular girl, right? So you fall in love with a regular girl, but he sees it all as frantic, Helen's beauty in the brow of Egypt. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. As imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. Okay, and what does this mean, right? So it was thought that epilepsy was the gift from the gods. Okay, so if you glance from heaven to earth, earth to heaven, you had fluctuations. It was a gift from the gods. But in fact, what does a poet do? And what do we do as writers? Which we give to airy nothing a local habitation and a name, that you make the truth out of words. And that's genius, in my opinion. Okay, we're going to look now at a piece of Holbein's Ambassadors. Holbein did this in 1533, which was the year that Henry VIII was divorcing Catherine of Aragon. Now, if you look at it, we know who these people are, and there have been countless books written about them, these two people. But if you look at them, they're big. They're looking straight at us. So in our culture here in Southern California, to be thin and fit is the thing to be. Well, in their culture, to be more heavy set meant you actually couldn't eat because thin people were starving. They were poor. Okay, so they're looking at us and they're going like this and they're being very cool. This is the National Gallery in London. It's a very big painting. Okay, and if you look at the table and even at what they're holding, okay, and they're dressed in furs, in ermine and in velvet and fur and everything else, with cool shoes. And they look like Birkenstocks, but anyway, they're with the cool shoes of the day. And between them, they have all the tools of learning. So if you think about today, if you're cool in LA, what do you have? You have a nice car, you have a hot body, you have a hot girlfriend or boyfriend, you have a nice house, you have movie star friends. Okay, in this time, the coolest you could be is to own books and to have tools of learning, which is completely different, in my opinion, than our culture right now. So what's between them? They have a compass, they have a globe, they have an astrolabe, they have a telescope, they have a lute, they have a book, they have, and people have written about this incredibly long pieces, okay? But what do you see? And you can't see it right if you don't look at it right. There's this weird anamorph on the floor. And an anamorph, maybe you grew up reading those little books about anamorphs, but an anamorph is an artistic trick, and it's a painterly trick. So if you are in the gallery when you see this, if you stand to the right of the painting and you don't look at it straight on, but you stand to the right, it turns into the skull. And they can't see it. And none of us know how we're going to die. So what all this learning calls into question, we think learning or money or fame will make us live forever, right? I mean, that's what people think, what's complete nonsense. But what they can't see is this thing. And I mean, I can't even believe they let him do this. And so if you stand there, it literally, I've taken lots of people there, it just pops out and you can only see it from the side. So you can't see your own death without seeing it from the side. So now I'm going to read from the most famous speech in Hamlet. We don't know where this really should appear in the play, but it has a lot to do with the painting I just described. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrongly, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the laws delayed, the insolence of office, and spurns that the patient merit makes of unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? A bodkin is like a little instrument like you prepare shoes with. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weird life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with a pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Okay, now so he's wondering if he should kill himself, right? Which you should think about that painting in relation to this, which is, do you die naturally or do you want to take yourself out? Okay, and a sea of troubles. So can you fight the sea? No, you cannot. Okay. And he says to die isn't like sleep, because, we all sleep, I hope. And when you sleep, isn't it a weird death, right? It's a weird way of being dead, funny way. All right. But he says, but why do we put up with this? 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Now, consummation is a weird word because it means if you consummate your marriage, you've had sex. If your consummate moment in your life is maybe your degree in college or your whatever, you just got $1 million or something like that. Okay. But consummation also means to be devoured, right? It means to be consumed. So the word is opposite of itself. And this is all over the play, just like that painting. They're like Mr. Cool, but in fact, death is right in front of them. It's a consummation devoutly for this. To die, to sleep, and he says, perchance to dream. So what happens when you die? Is the dream going to be worse than any dream you could have in real life, right? What dreams may come, and that's why we don't kill ourselves, because it makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear all these things that happen to us, right? The oppressor is wrong. Somebody does crap to you. The proud man's contumely. A proud person says you're an idiot. I don't care about you. The pangs of despised love. You're in love with somebody and they dump you. The law's delay. You can't get legal action. The offense of office. Okay, so someone on top of you gets better of you. The unworthy people get ahead of you when you could just kill yourself. Why put up with this? Why do it? Okay, because no one has come back from the dead to tell us what happens when it happens. And if you know anything about Hamlet, you know it's about a play in which someone does come back from the dead. And why does he say this? Right? And this is a big question because his father came back from the dead. And maybe he's just gotten into his Renaissance rhetoric, or maybe he's forgotten, or maybe he's confused. But we don't know this. And he says, conscience makes cowards of us all. And having just watched Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert being fired from their shows, conscience makes cowards of us all. What happened to these television stations that could not stand up to the government? And we don't have the conscience to stand up to the truth, it seems to me. So then I'm going to show you this picture of Imogen and Twinka, which I'm going to read to you about it from my book. And it's here's the photograph so you can see it. I hope you don't mind me reading it to you, but I had this picture over my bed from the day I first saw it in 1974, and then I became friends, crazily enough, with the actual photographer, which is a whole long story. And I got her to. We're now great friends, and so I use it for my book. In the photograph, Imogen and Twinka, we see the well-known American photographer Imogen Cunningham, who's really important, and the model Twinka. Cunningham, the old woman, is fully clothed, complete with spectacles, headband, dark stockings, and wedding ring. She has a camera around her neck, but she's not taking this picture. She seems to have just found her subject. The other woman is young, beautiful, and completely and arrestingly naked. In the photograph, an old woman looks like a young woman who looks back. The young woman casts a timid and whimsical smile. As these two women look across the divide of time and nature, they comprise all versions of each other, past, present, and future. They are mother and daughter, widow and virgin, spinster and nymph, photographer, model, artist, and muse. Caught in the parenthetical gaze, a tree halved and protruding between them, the identity of each woman is predicated on the other in this Eden composed of women alone. In the photograph, what looks like an eccentric old lady is really an artist. What could be a straight wood nymph is really the artist model. These two women, despite and perhaps because of their differences, are collaborative. They create, invent, and sustain one another, and this photograph is a depiction of their symbiotic relationship on various levels. In the picture, Cunningham's left arm is raised. Her pointed index finger looks as if she might have had it up to her lips, gesturing to her model to be quiet with an admonishing shish. At the same time, it looks as if she's pointing outside the photograph, telling Twinka to regard the viewer photographer. With this gesture, Cunningham worries her model that it's not only she who is looking at her, but we are looking at them. In this manner, the photograph raises the basic question of artistic authority. Is this Cunningham's photograph, her self-portrait, or is the artist who is about to take the picture of Twinka? Is the photograph the creation of Judy Dater, the person who actually snapped the picture of both women, or is it the viewer's making, as we voyeuristic look on from Dater's perspective? While the photograph suggests that many people may be in the artistic know, it also maintains the illusion that neither the viewer, subject, Dater, nor Cunningham are fully in control of the image. Imogen and Twinka eclipses artistic authority with its darting perspectives at the same time that its enigmatic depiction suspends the partition between subject, object, and artist. The portrait of two radical different women. Imogen and Twinka are examples of women so strangely unalike that they do not seem to belong to the same species, let alone the same sex. In which case, the photograph necessarily asks if these two are both women. What is the nature of women after all? How can womankind, as illustrated by Imogen and Twinka, be so distinct, contradictory, divided, and yet same? How are age, youth, wife, mother, nymph, artist, widow, beauty, crone, sexuality, reproductivity, sterility, intimacy, heterosexuality, and homosexuality contained in them? And how, finally, are the various permutations of the feminine reconciled to our consciousness, our desires, ourselves as women or as men? While we know that this picture was not taken by Cunningham, her camera is not perhaps as inactive as it looks. On her right thumb, we see the cord of an automatic release switch that she can squeeze at any minute to snap a picture. Her camera is open and ready, but is not pointed at her model. It is pointed directly at the viewer, or in this case, of the actual moment, the photographer. It is Cunningham who will take our picture as we look at her and Twinka. As the central tree that divides these two women is natural, underscored by the peace signs on Cunningham's camera strap, the photograph Imogen Quinta asks the viewer to reconcile the extremes of femininity, while at the same time depicting the radical nature of what it seemingly cannot possibly be true, let alone reconciled. By taking our photograph as we look on, Cunningham will capture our misunderstanding of the enigmatic trajectory of what it means to be a woman. Okay. So I'm going to read in relation to that from The Merchant of Venice. And this is Portia, who is dressed as a boy, coming to defend uh, against Shylock, who may be the Merchant of Venice, or it may be Antonio, but for his pound of flesh. And she comes before the court and pretends to be a lawyer, which she's not. And she talks about mercy. And she says, "You must be merciful." And he says, "Well, why should I be merciful?" And she says, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blessed him that gives and him that takes, the mightier in the mightiest. It becomes a throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread of fearful kings. But mercy is above the scepter's sway. It is enthroned in the heart of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show, like his gods, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, and in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoken thus much to migrate the issues of thy plea. So I think this has something to do with the Imogen portrait, not exactly about mercy, but this idea about how women are interveners into the problem, and how Portia talks about that mercy is what the gods have. And that if you're king, if you're nobody, if you're a Jew, it doesn't matter. You have to show mercy. And it's, to me, quite a brilliant speech.
My question seems very pedestrian now in comparison that everything came before here. Really, I wanted to see if is there a scene in Shakespeare's works that you would have liked to be part of in real time as he was writing it, so to speak?
Oh, well, many of them. I was going to talk about this, but
Oh, great.
let me have you look at, if you don't mind. So this is a Leonardo da Vinci painting of Mary, which I think is in the Uffizi, about 1500, and it's Saint Anne, Mary's mother, and Mary, the Virgin, is sitting on her lap, and they're big women, and Mary, the Virgin, is holding her baby, and in front of the baby is the lamb. And you know that Jesus was thought of as the Lamb of God, and he was going to sacrifice it. And she looks, to me at least, to try and pull him away from it. Because whose mother wants their kid to die, especially the way in which Jesus died? So it's an incredible picture, and there's a lot to say about it. One thing that Sigmund Freud did a great essay of, and this is actually true. Leonardo da Vinci had two mothers. His father had sex with a low woman, and then he dumped her and took Leonardo and married a high-end woman, and so he had two mothers. So it's always thought of as there were two mothers in Da Vinci's life, and maybe this is the story of two mothers. And here's yeah, certainly would have liked to have been part of any number of Shakespeare plays, but here's probably the greatest play Shakespeare ever wrote was King Lear, and, it's a very long story, but the king tries to divide up his, empire, which sounds like a good idea, and retire, and he makes a huge bunch of mistakes. Um, and maybe there are jobs you can't retire from. Poets don't retire, musicians don't retire, uh, hopefully filmmakers don't retire, actors don't retire, but other people do, and they go off and hang out on cruise ships and wear gauzy clothes or whatever and go golfing. But he ends up stranded, loses everything, his kingdom, his his daughters, his everything, everything, everything. And he realizes at some point, which is one of the most moving speeches in all of Shakespeare, that he has screwed up major time. And so he is in a storm. He's alone with his fool, and people come to rescue him and put him in a kind of hovel. And he says, "Poor naked wretches, wheresoe'er you are, that bide the pitiless pelting of this storm, how shall your houseless heads and unfed sides, your looped and winnowed raggedness, defend you from seasons such as these? Oh, I have taken too little care of this. Take physic pomp, expose thyself to feel what wretches feel, that thou mayst shake the superflux to them and show the heavens more just." And so he prays, and there's the most wonderful production of this by Peter Brooks, one of the greatest Shakespeare directors ever. Um, but he says he realizes he's a poor naked wretch. He's homeless. He's on the street, and I teach on Shakespeare to the homeless on Skid Row, so I'm extremely aware of what that means. Abide the pelting of this pitiless storm. So I'm now out here with you, right? How can your houseless heads, your unfed sides, how can you do this? And he says, I've taken too little care of this. As a king, he realizes he's screwed up. He didn't take care of the poor. Take physic pomp, which means take a drink of your own medicine, you pompous jerk. Expose thyself to feel what wretches feel. Put yourself on the street. And anyone in this room, spend one night on the street. We'd all be mad. Spend 7 years. I'm teaching people who've been on the street for 12 years. What would happen to you? Um, and feel what wretches feel, that thou mayst shake the superflux to them to show the heavens more just. Okay, so this is a very interesting problem because it means, for example, the superflux is the overabundance of what we have. So look at how much food is thrown away by every restaurant because there are all kinds of implications. You can't just give food to the poor because you might be sued because it might go off, right? You can't, all kinds of things. You can't, Trader Joe's does it, but they get a tax write-off. Okay, that's fine. And they're fine and they do it. But okay, fine. But shake the superflux to them. Here's the point, to show the heavens more just. Well, what does that mean? So I was using this example when I was teaching at university. Every Christmas, there's the same story on national TV. It's the same story, 4 o'clock news, and it's this. Poor family gets their Christmas tree, gets their presents. Somebody comes in and loots them. All the presents are gone. So some nice teacher in West LA or Beverly Hills gets their families to donate the presents. And everybody goes, oh, isn't that great? Well, it's good, but it intimates that there's goodness in the world. And maybe there is goodness in the world. I certainly think so. But maybe it's also a way of pretending there's goodness in the world, right? To show the heavens more just. Maybe the heavens are not just. Like maybe God, certainly in King Lear, has checked out, and if there is a God. And so it's an interesting problem of generosity, or why do you give people something, right? And how, in my opinion, corrupt a lot of agencies that I used to believe in. Like where's that money actually going? And do you feel better? I used to have all these students at LMU who would, do service and think, oh, I was so great. I was tutoring these kids and I was working on all. Yeah, well, that's about their ego. It's not about the people that are actually living there. And he's talking about my responsibility was to make sure that people believed there was good in the world, and maybe there was not. Who knows? Okay, and I'll end with the last thing. So this is a painting by Veronese, and he was commissioned by the Jesuits in Venice to do this for a refectory, and it was supposed to be the Last Supper. And I'm not going to go into detail, but it's quite a belligerent painting. It's got Protestants, monkeys, dogs, booze. It's got all kinds of things that probably were not at the Last Supper. So the Inquisition came in and said, you don't fix that painting, baby, you're going to jail. So he waited a month, and they came back, and he changed the title to The Feast in the House of Levi. So a title matters, which is an interesting thing. If you just change your name, if your name was really Roxanne and now you're Susie, you're a different person. And so I'll read you my last reading, which is from Macbeth, his most famous speech, which is about many things. But the problem of evil is one of the things, and the problem of titles is many things. And so this is the last speech, and then I'll stop. So you find out at the end that a guy named, who's never showed up at the play before, named Satan, Seyton, but it's pronounced Satan as in the devil, is the only person that is left with him. And he finds out that his wife, who's been sleepwalking after the murders of the king and all kinds of other things, has died. And he says, she should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour on the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So, I mean, in relation to the Veronese painting, but um, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, like we think of the future, right? We all think of, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to become this. But he says it's all bullshit. It creeps in its petty pace from day to day till the last syllable of recorded time. The history of the future doesn't matter, right? And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. So what's happened in the past is just going to kill you, right? In the end, out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player. So we're all actors. And that's a very interesting idea, right? Because we think we're being real. I don't even know what that means, but we wear certain clothes. We have certain personas. I mean, I'm not saying that we're all actors, but that's the theory here, which is that we're acting, right? I mean, we're cool, or we're vulnerable, or we're whatever we are, but we're acting. And we strut and fret on a stage. We're bad actors, right? We don't do it very well. And then nobody gives a shit. Then it's heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And that's a great line, because in the end, sorry to end on a low note, but what signifies everything. Now, Shakespeare's word for nothing is a very important word. He uses it very, very importantly. And the word nothing, on the one hand, means what we think of it as is nothing, but it means to him also everything. So I would just end with one little thing. When Freud came to America, gave a bunch of lectures, and when he left on the boat to go home, the reporter said, "Well, you've told us all these things that we were shaped by our childhoods, and we are forever shaped by that, and maybe we have no hope out of that." And the reporter asked him, "What is the secret to happiness?" And he said, since Daniel speaks German, Liebe und Arbeit, love and work. And I have any advice to you, I've been really lucky in this, fall in love and get good work. That's all that matters.
How can our listeners find wonder in their own personal lives, do you think?
Yeah, well, I just sort of said it. I mean, I
Well,
think,
aside, I'm trying to, what if they can't find love? And what if people are unemployed or have not found their passion?
yeah, well, I think as I said about children in the beginning of this thing, I think you have to recover. Picasso said he spent his whole life trying to draw like a child. And he was a great classical, artist. Despite all the stuff he did, he was. And I think you have to make your goal to do work that shapes you and moves you. You have to. And you have to be lucky in love. I only met one person I could ever have been married to, and I was very, very lucky. But that cannot happen to everybody. But it's worth looking out for, I think. And I can't advise on that because I'm not Oprah Winfrey. But I do think you should not go to university or not get out of university without thinking about what's my future. And I think so often people go to school and then, or what do they do? And they have no clue what they're doing coming out. And so I think from, curiosity and wonder are the two big things, and hard work. And I don't know the answer because I was really lucky, but I had to change careers. I was a musician for a long time, and then I had to change careers, and it was fine. I mean, it was hard, but I think you have to find things that move you. And for me, it's art, literature, music, um, uh, but yeah, I kind of have to find it. And sometimes that's because maybe your parents didn't train you to find it, or maybe you didn't have that opportunity. I don't know. But I do believe love and work are the two things that matter.
Are you a religious person?
Well, I was raised Catholic, and I believe I have tremendous trepidation about the established Catholic Church. Like, I don't like them at all. But I think the basic message of Jesus and Socrates is, who neither of them wrote a word down that they ever said, but Jesus certainly, is take care of other people, be good to other people, forgive other people, take care of people that are lepers, prostitutes, blah, 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 the poor. I believe that stuff. And I believe the Sermon on the Mount, and I think that's good. But I'm not sure I believe in God. I'm not sure I believe in any of that stuff. But I do think that is a good preface for life. And I've certainly taken care of a lot of people. I mean, I have 5 people living with me right now who are not paying rent, couldn't afford to live anywhere. And I'm teaching on Skid Row, and it's not because I'm such a good person. I just think you have to take care of other people. And that is an odd thing because, like, even teaching on Skid Row, these people, they have given me more than I'm giving them. I'm at a class yesterday. I cannot tell you, these people are living on the street, they're reading Shakespeare better than I can read Shakespeare, which is kind of unbelievable. And we're doing writing lessons with them and all kinds of stuff, and it's very unpredictable. But I think when you take care of other people, you're taking care of yourself, which is my theory. It may not be right. It may not be right for your audience, but I do think that.
No, it's incredible that they found a sense of wonder with
Oh, yeah.
you,
No, they're
with
I
you.
mean, they're unbelievable.
Dr. de Vroom, thank you for reminding us that wonder isn't something we outgrow. For you listening right now, I invite you to notice one moment of wonder in your own day. It doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It might be the sound of a child's question, the way light falls through the window, or a single line of poetry that moves you. Because when we pause long enough to look, wonder has a way of finding us. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep your heart open to the mysteries that make life extraordinary. Theresia, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well done. This was so wonderful. Thank you.